My name is Dr. Keith McNally, and this is Trail to Transformation. This is the podcast for veterans by veterans. Because I like to get names right, this is Kristen Christy. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. I have asked Kristen to be in this call for a very, very special reason. She's the co-creator of the 988 Crisis Hotline. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It brings joy to my heart.
Well, I do appreciate it. And so there is so much to uncover and unpack in this conversation. And I don't want to kind of hold us up. So I guess the best way to approach the beginning is to kind of figure out what the backstory is here. So what happened and why was this a thing that you kind of adopted into?
So many times in life, these new creations or ideas are birthed from trauma, truly, and this is no exception. I was lucky enough to grow up in the Air Force, move all over the world, love the crazy military life. And it was no surprise when I went to college and I hung out at the ROTC building because I needed to find my community, right? We all do. That sense of belonging. And specifically, the Air Force ROTC unit at the University of Texas in Austin. And so it was no surprise when I ended up marrying someone, Don Christie, and we got married a week after he was commissioned in the Air Force. And our first assignment was up to Grand Forks, North Dakota, aka Whiteout, North Dakota. All the glamorous spots you can go to, and we go to Grand Forks. And I will tell you, finding our community there was amazing. It was the best place that we had lived because of the people in that community. The tight knitness of Grand Forks Air Force Base, as well as the extreme winters, you kind of get to know your neighbors really well. After 4 years there, and we had our first son there, we moved to Colorado Springs, Colorado. And we were really excited about the opportunity. But once we got here, Don was out at Schriever Space Force Base now for 2 years. And he came home one day and he said, Kristen, my active duty career is not going the way I want it to. And I feel like I need to separate from the Air Force. And of course, rocked my world, right? You being a veteran as well, that's part of your identity, that ID card. For me, being a military spouse, growing up in the world, in the world of the military. And that's when he told me, hey, Kristen, don't be so dramatic. We still have the Air Force Reserve. So he joined the Air Force Reserve so we could still get that culture in. And his career took off. He became a squadron commander as a major. It was the largest space squadron in all of Air Force Reserve Command. He was a great leader. And he came home one day and said, Kristen, I have been tasked with getting volunteers for deployment to Baghdad for 4.5 months. And I don't feel right asking for volunteers unless my name is at the top of the list. And that is when I realized he truly was a good leader. A manager or supervisor says go, and a leader says let's go. And Don said let's go. In 2004, he was the only one chosen from that list for deployment to Baghdad. He was second in command at the Baghdad airport. And at that time, we didn't have Skype, we didn't have the FaceTime. It was the boys. We had two boys at the time, and we would email him at night. And hopefully in the morning, we would get an email from Don before I took the boys to school. And he told us about meeting Donald Rumsfeld, the former Secretary of Defense on the tarmac, and Ted Nugent signing his gun holster when he was there on a USO tour. Um, but things were different. That's really all he talked about. What we considered the fun stuff. The boys really enjoyed hearing about things like that. How Toby Keith took a nap on his couch when he had arrived for that same USO tour. But when Don came home, he was different. And we hear a lot about it, don't we? Especially even in 2004, 20 years ago, that we know to give them time when they come back, the reacclimation period. And we tried. Don was chosen for Army War College. We were excited about the opportunity to learn Army E's because we knew Air Force E's. And it was a great opportunity to really get to know the other branches. And it was an honor for him to be chosen to go in residence. But things were still different. We moved to Carlisle, Pennsylvania, Carlisle Barracks for Army War College. And instead of going to the Pentagon afterwards, we came back to Colorado Springs. Air Force Reserve Command needed him back at Air Force Space Command. And we were here for a year. And I will tell you, that was the hardest move for us because your mindset, when you get those orders, your mindset is you check the Chamber of Commerce and the Visitor Center for wherever you know, your new
Your duty
assignment
station.
is.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And you sometimes have a sponsor family. So our mindset was we were going to the DC area, we were going to enjoy it, we were getting ready for a new community, and then for to come back to Colorado Springs. And we loved the Springs. But being gone for 11 months was really difficult. On top of what Don was going through, he had earned the Bronze Star when he was over there. You don't get a Bronze Star by having Toby Keith take a nap on your couch or meeting Donald Rumsfeld on the tarmac.
Right.
But we didn't really know the why he had earned that. Um, and in April of 2008, it was almost 2 years when we had moved back to Colorado Springs, we got that doorbell and the notification from a chaplain and two officers that Don had taken his life 3 days before he pinned on Colonel. I will never ever forget that moment. It'll be 17 years in April, but that was the catalyst to make changes because I felt like I failed as a spouse. I failed as a community member. I failed as a mother. Um, and trying to get over the shame and guilt was very difficult. I don't think I would have been able to do that without my community that I was embedded in.
There will be a whole lot to unpack here, but to make sense of this, because one of my focuses as a U.S. Marine combat veteran who himself has had struggles with PTSD, suicide ideation, have made 5 attempts against my own life since 1996. You mentioned, you specifically said he was different. And I really would like for you to unpack that as much as you can, being gentle with your words, so that those who are watching and listening to this conversation could at least recognize. They may sense something, but a lot of times when we sense things, but we can't put our finger on, oh, this is what's going on, or this is what's going on, it's really important for this conversation, for those who are listening, to have that awareness. And so, could you give us, please, some awareness as to what you mean that things were different?
Yeah, and so many times it's hindsight where we look back and we're like we're evaluating the lesson that we're to learn. I love the motto from Victor Law, an athlete. He said, "Life is a tough teacher. We get the test first and then learn the lesson."
Yeah.
And so I did notice Don was different when he came back. He was more reserved than typical. So I'm an uber extrovert. He was not. um, he was more of an introvert, very great leader. Wasn't shy by any means. It's just he had to have quiet time to recharge, where I get my recharge from external sources. But he was even more reserved than typical. Um, little and some of it, not all was negative. It was he came home and his new hobby was aromatherapy. It was cigar smoking out on the back porch. That's what they would call it over there, was
Okay.
aromatherapy.
Okay.
Um, and and it was more of that isolation time for him. But I just felt a different energy. We all have Eeyore days, and some of us are more Tigger than Eeyore. But when those Eeyore days hang around a lot longer, that's what I felt like it was with Don. Our boys were very active. Our oldest son, Ryan, was a musician, very creative in that space. Ben, our youngest, was very much into sports, football, basketball. And before the deployment, Don would really make a concerted effort to attend all of the boys' activities. Um, and he didn't do that as much. The energy was lower. Afterwards, after his suicide, that's when I really reflected on, okay, what did I miss? Again, that feeling of failure. His fingernails were bitten down to the nubs. Those were things I really didn't notice until I I I like to think of myself as a noticer,
Mhm.
but I'm even more of a noticer now after being intentional. And even at his funeral, one of his coworkers came up and said, Kristen, he took all of his pictures of his family down off of from his office, from his desk. Again, she noticed it, but it didn't register. And I think the family members are on the front lines of that emotional battlefield. And because I've spent the last 16 years, one, getting over the shame and guilt and the feeling of failure, which my therapist helped me understand meant first attempt in learning, um, and that the guilt is more regret. I did the best that I could with the resources I had,
Mhm.
and the shame had no place between my ears. That was all self induced. But I've spent the last 16 years learning resilience skills, learning the signs of someone who is in crisis. Um, and I've gotten really comfortable to come to someone without judgment and ask them, are you thinking of suicide? I wish I could go back 16 years ago and ask that of Don. And I know that he would have been angry. He would have lashed out because it would have hit a nerve, right? It's when people lash out, there's some truth in what's going on in the situation. I would much rather him be angry with me asking that question than our 14-year-old Ryan giving the eulogy at his dad's funeral. There are other signs that he didn't show, like trying to give your things away. Now, I've had a friend who retired from the Air Force and he's like, "We are giving everything away because we are moving into our RV." That's what they wanted to do, right? Take a look at the context of why are they trying to give things away, or why are they sending a text message that says, "Hey, I don't know." Just something, use your intuition, right? And take a look at some of those things in the context of those things. And it's okay to reach out to a family member to say, hey, he or she just seems off to me, because there's power in numbers.
Mhm.
When you ask, we call it ACE in the military. It's ask, care, escort. Ask that question. You are not putting it in their head for the first time. they've thought about it, what you're showing them is you see them in crisis, you see them as a human being. That means a heck of a lot. And then care for them. And by caring for them, it may mean calling a mutual friend or calling a family member, say, hey, would you come over and help us, not him or her, but us as a community, um, to get through this. And then escort, whether it's escorting to Cohen Veteran Network or one of the many resources we have for our veteran community or in our military community to get that help. Don't do it alone by any means.
2020 is perfect vision, and hindsight gives us that 2020. But we often doubt ourselves. We regret the things that we did or didn't do. And I hear all this in your voice and in your conversation. And for one, I want to say my condolences, please, because you have faced a lot of challenges. The loss of your husband, your first husband. You've grown since then. You have been able to intentionally grieve, I'm hoping, take on a new life. But because of this situation, you did something, you co-created something. And I think this is a marvelous thing that you've done, especially for the veteran community. Now, it may not have been specifically for the veteran community to start. I don't know. You're going to share that. But the 988 crisis hotline is the question is always why wasn't this developed sooner, right? Why wasn't these resources available for those who struggle? My first suicide attempt was in 1996, and I was alone and didn't know what to do. But you took action. Could you kind of talk us into that transition point that says, I've faced this. It's important that nobody else face this.
Yeah. I think anyone who goes through trauma, and we all do, and it's not comparing your adversities to my adversities or anyone of your listeners comparing. It's we've all experienced a 10 out of 10 on the pain scale, right? Whether it lasts a long time or lasts, that raw instance. Um, but it took my community to help me get out of bed to take my boys to school. My friends came over to the house. They got me out of bed. They didn't take my kids to school. They made me take my kids to school. God bless them for that. Um, but it was about 2 years. So during those 2 years between Don's death and so it was he died in 2008 in 2010 or yeah 2010. In those 2 years the boys and I really had a tough time, especially the boys. Both boys had attempted suicide. And my oldest son has been missing for more than 9 years as a result of the suicide. My youngest son, Ben, was 12 when his dad died. And on his 20th birthday, he left me a voicemail the night he attempted suicide. I'd like to play that for your listeners with the understanding that this is a 20-year-old young man sobbing with abandonment in his voice, talking about he can't live without his dad. So this is kind of a red flag warning before we play that.
So just for disclaimer's sake, how long is this voice message?
It's a minute and a half long. It
Okay.
seems like forever for me anyway, but I will say that Ben just got married. He's expecting a baby boy in April, he and his wife. He's getting his master's degree. The military is paying for his master's degree. Life is good. But this is an example of something that's left behind. Then after that, I will go into how 988 came about.
Sounds good to me. Okay, so we're going to
I miss Dad. Mommy. I miss Dad so much. I can't live without him. I can't. I need him right now. I need him so much. I just need someone right now, Mom. Mommy. Mommy. I need Dad right now. I can't live without him. It's the worst year of my life. Mommy, I'm not okay. I'm not okay right now, Mom. I really need help. I really need help. I really need answers.
What happened as a result of hearing this?
So Ben was at the University of Arizona in Tucson. I was here in Colorado Springs, and I wake up to that voicemail. He left it at 1:30 in the morning. My phone was off. That's why I didn't answer. And I contacted him. I tried to anyway, but his community, his fraternity brothers, his roommates got him the help that he needed. He was on a 72-hour hold, but I was in communication with his roommates and all. And that was a tough time for Ben to be on a 72-hour hold. He still remembers that. It was a real wake-up call for him. But it was like, God, don't trust me so much with all of this. Can we just have an equal, a balanced life for a little bit? I don't think the boys need to go through all of this. Um, and in 2010, it was before the voicemail and all that, but I started thinking about, it was 3 o'clock in the morning when I woke up. I tell you, I get some awesome ideas at 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what it is. I'd much rather sleep, and I woke up and my first son had already attempted by this time. I thought, we have 911 for a medical emergency. Why don't we have a 3-digit lifeline for the suicide hotline, which is 800-273-TALK. And we've
Not
had that.
everybody's not everybody's going to know that.
Right. And it's when you're in crisis, or, it's like trying to search for that number. I mean, I've memorized it because I talk about it so much, but I thought we need to break down barriers. So before 988 went online in July of 2022, we've had the 800 number, the 800-273-TALK, which is still active. And it goes to the same place that 988 goes to. So the crisis lines for every state were developed in 2005. So after your first attempt. I don't really know what there was for you in 1996.
And I know I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm thankful that in 2005, and every state is in charge of their crisis line. 800 number still works. But in 2010, I said, we have 911. Why don't we have a 3-digit number for a mental health emergency? And I was still dealing with the shame and the guilt at the time, but I had just gotten my first job after being a stay-at-home mom for 15 years, trying to get back into the community, not just in the military community, but in my community of Colorado Springs, in the state of Colorado. So I started just socializing the idea.
What does that mean
And
exactly?
so I
Socializing the
just started
idea.
talking about it when I was
Okay.
going to networking events, and because I was new to I had a degree, but I hadn't used it in 15 years. I got a job as a receptionist for a defense contractor. And So as I was doing things and I was getting more open about my story, about our story, our family story, and I just started, researching suicide in Colorado, in El Paso County, in the veteran community, thinking locally before I went globally.
Hmm.
And it was amazing. And as I was mentioning or talking about my story to very select few people, how it resonated with them, or they would tell me about a situation they had gone through with their family member, or they knew someone who had gone through it. Again, this was 16 years ago. We didn't talk about suicide like we do now. To let people know that they aren't alone, they aren't
Hmm.
dealing with this alone. We've all experienced that, many of us have experienced that specific 10 out of 10 on the pain scale.
Hmm.
So as I was talking about it and said, wouldn't it be great if we had a 3-digit number for a suicide hotline instead of the 800 number? And then it was amazing because I would say it to somebody and someone in their community had a connection with the state house. Um, and then they had someone who was connected to their state senator on Capitol Hill. And then it was amazing to see the dots align and people way smarter than me that knew how to do this um, came on board. And we did get some no's. No is an acronym for next opportunity. We just found that next opportunity.
I like that.
Um, and it took 12 years of advocating, but in 2020, it was signed as an executive order in the White House. And they had 2 year, the FCC had 2 years to work on getting the number. And they had decided on 988. They wanted a number away from one, so it wasn't fat fingered. 988 is actually an area code, I think in California, somewhere on the West Coast. It's a smaller area that the area code works with.
So they took it?
Yep.
Okay.
So I think 988 is still an area code.
Okay.
So in October of 2021, so a year after it was signed as an executive order, a year, not quite a year before it was released, July 16th of 2022. So October of 2021, we all got a text message from our cell carrier that said, you now have to dial 10 digits, even if it's a local number. So I
Oh,
have a 620 area code. And if I wanted to call someone else in the 620 area code, I just had to dial the 7 numbers, the three and then the
right,
four.
right, right. Yeah, yeah.
October of 2021, they said, nope, you have to dial all 10. And I remember my new groom, also in the Air Force Reserve, I can't get away from it. uh, he came up one day. He's been working from home pretty much ever since 2020. He came up and he said, hey, I was listening to talk radio and the DJ was, or, the reporter was complaining about having to dial 10 digits now. And so I called him. My husband said, I called him and I let him know why. And it was because 988.
Right.
You have to dial a 10 digit even for a local number. So now, living in Colorado Springs, I do have a 620 number. If I dial 988 from Colorado Springs, it will reach the Kansas crisis line because it's a Kansas area code.
Okay.
So right now it's geo-routed.
Okay.
We're trying to get it geolocated like 911. So if I call it from Colorado Springs, it will reach the Colorado crisis line. And then you are prompted. So it's good anywhere in the US and Canada and from any military government landline overseas. You can dial 988. So it is global.
Wow.
And if you think of the 800 number and 988 as like two different, for example, two different website addresses that point to the same website. It's not a new organization. It's just a new way to get to an established organization. And you reach a trained professional.
Mm.
They aren't volunteers, it's trained professional to help you through that crisis and to help you when you have a friend in crisis. It's okay to call and say, I'm calling for a friend. And I really mean that. um, and then you were prompted. You could even text to 988, which we didn't have that before. It was a separate text number for the texting line. So if you would rather, I know my younger son, who's 29 now, Ben, the voicemail, um, he would much rather text than call. Finally, I had to politely ask him for my birthday and Mother's Day, would you please call me instead of texting? Right? But that's the way he communicates. So that's an option. But when you are connected either by phone or by text, there's a chat line as well. And they even have video phones for the hard of hearing at 988.
Okay.
You
The
will be
TTY.
prompted. Yep,
Yeah.
you will be prompted. Dial 1 if you're a veteran or military or family member, and you go to the Veteran Crisis Line, which is staffed by people who have the cultural understanding of being a veteran and being a part of the military community. 2 for Spanish speakers, 3 for the LGBTQ plus community. Again, reaching someone who has the cultural understanding of that community. And right now, just in the state of Washington, you will be prompted with dial 4 for the indigenous community. So we are trying to get that for the other states that have a really high indigenous community. And I would eventually love to see like dial 5 if you are under 18 years old
Well,
for
that
the
shouldn't
state of
be too
Maine.
far off then, I hope.
So, but it takes a lot of coordination. Again, you're working with 50 states plus Puerto Rico and Guam and places like that, DC area. Um, but I don't know if it would have helped Don. But I know that as it has saved others and other family members and other communities from going through what we went through. And that's what's so important. I can't change the past. Yes, I have regrets and I've changed those. Like I said, I'm very open to asking someone. If I have this intuition, if my heart, my head, my gut is telling me something,
Mhm.
even just to reach out and text someone. So every morning I text 2 people randomly from my contact list. Just, hey, I was thinking of you. It's not necessarily starting a conversation, but it's checking in on people. And it makes me feel sick. Can you tell by my face? It makes me feel good just thinking about it. But I've texted my plumber who's in my contact list, and he's like, wrong number. And I said, I appreciate everything you do, Steve. So I don't have to do it. Right. But just to know someone's thinking of you, it's that community. And I think as human beings, not just the veteran community, but as human beings, we all want to feel protected, respected, and connected, and a sense of belonging.
And I want to touch on that before our conversation ends, but I just want to add that before, and we've only met, this is maybe our second or third real conversation. So we have only met rather recently at based on the time of this recording. I have been embedding that whole 988 system in my bi-weekly newsletter on LinkedIn. So I have the Question Guy newsletter. It's been running well, actually, I've just published 107 or 108
Wow,
newsletters.
congratulations. That's
So
great.
newsletter. So it used to be just an article, but then I kind of leveled up and it
Yeah.
became like a newsletter. And like about mid sometime this year, so this is 2024, this is the tail end of 2024, I started adding that because of kind of the very thing that you're talking about. It's a slow evolution of no, you're on the receiving end of the suicide. I am the attempter.
Mhm.
And it took me a long, long time to, and this is even after my fifth attempt in 2021. And I mean a long time as in months to years. You know, some people may say, well, long time is 5 years. After five attempts, I knew something had to be different with my life. And so I was intentional about making changes, very specific changes. But then I became comfortable with the narrative, for many, many years, even up until maybe mid 2023. That wasn't that wasn't part of me. It wasn't my conversation. It wasn't something that I admitted. And now here I am, a year later, having conversations with people and sharing my own story. So that becomes very much a part of who I am. And so I just want to let you know that I have been sharing that, not knowing that this conversation would
Yeah.
have ever have taken place, outside of a mutual friend.
Yeah.
So one, I want to thank you so much for being courageous, really, for being brave and kind of stepping into the space where you knew something needed to be different, just like I knew in my own personal life that something needed to be different. Now, for me, I want to hike the Appalachian Trail in
Trail to
2020.
transformation.
Trail to
I love
transformation,
it.
trail to transformation, hiking for hope and healing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my endeavor, my campaign to let other veterans know, regardless of branch of service, that this, whatever your situation is, doesn't have to be overwhelming, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to feel alone or afraid or scared. Um, there's stuff out there in the world that still needs to be experienced. And
Yes.
this is my challenge to myself and my hope that it can inspire other veterans to kind of say, hey, step out of your
Yep.
comfort zone.
Yep.
Come walk with me, even if it's only for a mile or so. I'm going to do the whole
Yeah.
thing. So it's
We do
2,000,
life together,
it's
right? Do life
193
together.
miles. Yeah, absolutely. Um, Lastly, everything around this conversation from your side of the microphone, you've talked about tribe. You've talked about community. It's been the essential
Mm.
cornerstone of, I think, your evolution. And so has always been, it seems, has always been a part of your life, but more so now because of this pivotal thing that has occurred with you. Um, leave, let's leave our audience with the idea, your perspective on just how valuable community really is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the world seems so much bigger when we look at it alone. And I think 2020 really made isolation acceptable. And to me, it's not. There are times where some of us need to recharge, not me, but when some of us need to recharge internally and have that alone time to be the best person that we could be. It's knowing ourselves, it's knowing what charges us up, charges our battery. And um I've learned I'm writing a book right now on the acronyms, and I mentioned a couple of them here, like no, next opportunity, right? The next time you get the answer no, just think about what we did as kids. We would go to one adult in the house and ask for something and they said no. What did we do next? We went to the other. We found the next opportunity. There is something better out there for you. But sometimes when we have those blinders on of despair and depression and anxiety, we don't see it. So it takes other people and their perspective to see what we can't see.
Mm,
That's part of community. Fail, first attempt in learning. We are learning lessons all the time from those failures, and it's okay. What's more important, I think, is those lessons that we learned, we are supposed to help tutor other people through their lessons. Remember, life is a tough teacher. We get the test first and then we learn the lesson. We can't necessarily be there for them for the test, but we can help navigate and be their tutor for the lessons that they are going through
Mhm.
with tutoring from what we've learned from our lessons, and it may not be the exact same. Um, but we still learned some lessons. My younger son, Ben, the voicemail came home when he was 14 and he said, Mom, I'm going to be a wise man, not a smart man. And I said, Oh, what's the difference? And he said, A smart man learns from his own mistakes, a wise man learns from others.
No, he picked it up from somewhere. So
Right? It's like I'm smart and wise in the same day, learning from my own mistakes and learning from other people's mistakes. But I want to end with an acronym that has two meanings. And I think this is going to be the first chapter of my book and the last chapter of my book. And that's hope. Hope stands for hold on, pain eases. The E doesn't stand for end. I think you and I know that. It ebbs and flows. It eases because of the community surrounding us, our safety net, the resources available to us. But it also stands for help one person every day. When we need our own pain to ease, get outside of your own circumstance and help someone else. Maybe that's if you don't really care for people, but you love animals, then volunteer at the Humane Society. It's that sense of purpose.
Mhm.
You get outside of your own circumstances, you're helping their pain ease, and you may not know what their pain is, but there is real power in helping other people. But I also want to encourage your listeners that maybe the one person they help is themselves. It is not selfish. We have to take care of ourselves in whatever form or fashion ignites the fire within your soul. I don't know if you enjoy hiking. I mean, is that just a passion of yours, or is that some, you know, I
At this
just
point,
find
I'm not sure either.
I well, see, it would
No,
be
that's actually it's my
easier.
sacred space. It's totally my sacred space.
Yeah,
I'll pull out a 20-mile hike and I won't sleep for 24 hours because my energy is just at a different level.
you're so
So
jazzed, right?
it's totally now. Now I've always been athletic. In
Uh-huh.
terms of when I was younger, I actually would run. So I was a Marine, and so it's part of
Oh,
the it's part of the job. Um, at 50 years old, that kind of went by the wayside, and so I started walking. Walking was the
yeah.
go-to in terms of just being balanced
Mm-hmm.
with my life. But after my heart attack, so first it was you know, the
Yeah.
2021 fifth suicide attempt, and then a year later I have a heart attack. The medical team should, in their own special way, said you should be dead. And again, in their own gentle way, I decided that again, if I'm going to be living, I need to be living intentionally. And so I had wrote a book. It's behind me,
Yeah.
Walking the Path, A Leader's Journey. That's about hiking over a mountain. And so it just kind of made sense to me that if I wrote a book about it, hell, you might as well do it.
Exactly. I love it. And I do want to just say I am so glad you're here.
Thank you.
I am so glad that you learned from the lessons. It's not just first attempt in learning, but further attempt in learning. Um, because you're making a real difference. And if you weren't here, it wouldn't be the same.
One of the things that a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, always come back to when we have conversations, and we've recorded several of them on my YouTube channel. If you don't learn the lesson, the universe comes back around. It circles back around until you do. So for me, 5 times was enough. So you're right.
Yep.
The universe is going to circle back around until you learn it.
Yep.
That's been quite a conversation that we've had. It's been a blessing, and I thank you so much for sharing all that you have done and your continued work. So what's down the line now that you are have what's going on?
Yeah, still trying to get 988, the awareness out there. Only 23% of adults know about 988. So that is so this opportunity to talk on about it is I'm so grateful for the opportunity. I am a speaker. I travel the world, mainly military bases, veteran organizations. I'm expanding out to like veteran employee resource groups to talk about resilience. I am a master resilience trainer for the Air Force and the Army. I'm going to be working on my doctorate in grief counseling here pretty soon, writing the book, and looking for more opportunities to facilitate workshops and presentations, just to walk alongside people. My friends call me an emotional support human. So
Love it.
the more I can do that, the and I'm looking to level up in 2025. I just it really does set my soul on fire to to walk alongside people to help take that veil of darkness and bring hope, to bring hope, because hope is not canceled.
I love it. So hope's going around and I use it, you use it. Thank you so
Yep.
much. And for those of you who've been watching and listening, as always, I'll see you next time. Take care.
Thanks.